Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of TBR. And I'm George Binns. And this evening we want to talk about sustainability and electrification and how's it going to impact the city of Beverly. And to help us understand it, we have the City Councilor at Large, Hannah Bowen. Welcome, Hannah.
Thanks, George. Good to be here.
So, sustainability, I guess, is the overriding issue. And everything sort of falls out about that. And as I was talking before the show, to me, sustainability really means how are we going to reuse all the stuff we got, because all we got is what's here, and there's very little coming in and practically nothing going out. So we use it, and they got to learn how to reuse it, which gets us into recycling. So we've got a contract with JRM, and one of the quirky things about the contract is we as homeowners have to split the trash into 3 buckets. One is paper only, one is cans and bottles, and the other is the usual household trash. Then JRM comes by and picks up the household trash. Then they come by and pick up the paper and the cans and throw them all in the same bin. And I guess one of the issues is, why are we doing that? You know, at one time I thought they had a truck that you could separate the stuff, but what's going on with that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that I think the answer keeps changing as what's possible evolves. So yeah, the city contracts with a waste management company. JRM was bought out by a larger company,
okay.
Republic, but under the same contract now, the city will be putting that back out to bid and either renegotiating or finding a new provider within the next couple of years. So our contract is coming due. But what's in that contract is basically what does it cost per ton to take our trash away and generally incinerate it and take our recyclables. And the recycling market keeps changing.
Yeah.
So we were in a position where we had negotiated that separation. And the capability of the company was to move to single stream. A lot of communities have done that, which means all of your recyclables, your paper, your cans, your plastics, recyclable plastics, can all go in together. But because we were so good at separating, we had very clean streams of recycling because they get separated back out at the facility.
Yeah.
So we've benefited and been able to have decent pricing in part because of that. But I think some of the other things that I'm excited about when it comes to waste reduction and living more sustainably are, I use the city compost site now. So I'm a renter. In my previous apartment, the landlord offered the curbside compost from Black Earth. That's something anybody in the city can sign up for. And it diverts all the really heavy stuff in your trash, really, all the compostable food scraps, and actually more than I expected when I looked at the list. I was like, oh, that's also compostable. But when I moved, new building doesn't have compost offered. But thankfully, our sustainability director had really advocated for a downtown compost drop-off site. So now there are 2, and you have to sign up to be able to use the drop-off bins. But now my trash has really gone down to very little. And I think that's what people in the sustainability field right now are really talking about. It's a list of like 40 R's of, you reuse, you recycle is on that list, but it's like, how do we think more broadly about refusing things we don't need or packaging we don't need? A lot of that reuse and repair of things so that the materials we're bringing into our homes are less disposable. And there's a lot of strategies beyond just what then comes out as our waste to further upstream prevent a lot of that waste happening. So it's great to see the city supporting that, and just seeing some of the movement around Beverly If you go to big city events now, you'll typically see volunteers either from Green Beverly, the nonprofit, or from our waste reduction committee, or who are just interested and connect with the folks running the event, who will compost. They'll separate out all the compost.
Yeah.
And most of the bigger events in the city now have very little waste. So they're working with vendors at events to bring in less that will become waste, less packaging and things, and shifting so that waste stream is mostly going to compost. So.
Yeah, that I guess is the problem is with the advent of Amazon and a few others, there's cardboard boxes all over the place.
Yep.
Or plastic wrap.
Yep.
And it's convenient to dial up. Nobody dials up anything. You punch it up on a keyboard. And
but that sound is still seared in our brains.
Oh yeah, I go back too far. And next thing you know, it's on your front porch. So that is helping the system because less travel back and forth to a market or going around to different stores trying to find what you're looking for. So that is a helpful issue. But like you say, you get an awful lot of stuff. And I guess the thing that is most difficult to understand is a lot of things come packed in styrofoam because they're valuable and they're vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I guess Beverly just had a styrofoam.
It's this weekend.
It's this weekend it's coming.
Yep.
Where it's a freebie. You just drop it off.
Yep.
So it's...
And that was timed particularly to be after the holiday season when a lot of people are doing end-of-year gift giving, shopping, getting stuff ready for the new year.
Yeah.
So if anybody has styrofoam, hold on to it because there's this one this weekend. But between Beverly and Salem, we share collection usually of household hazardous waste, styrofoam, electronics, and have these drop-offs periodically. So it's usually free. Some of the electronics, depending on who's running it, you pay a small amount, but those are great opportunities. Yeah.
High school uses it as a fundraiser kind of thing.
But the styrofoam, the household hazardous waste, you're mostly just getting it out and getting it safely disposed of.
Yeah. And the other one, too, is used medications.
Yep.
Or unused ones that are left over.
Right, yeah, leftover.
That you can either dump them off at the high school,
The police station.
Or the hospital.
Yep. And they've got collection days.
That's one of the other no-nos. You don't want to dump it into the sewer system.
Yep.
Because it raises havoc with the water supply.
Yeah.
So a lot of this stuff has to be thought out that people are not used to.
Yeah. And I think part of it is that, like, we make our individual decisions, right? But then some of the solutions require a little bit bigger scale. So if I just have one piece of styrofoam, I think, well, I'll just throw it away. What am I going to do with it? I'm not going to go find the specialized facility that can reprocess styrofoam. But if the city organizes a drive, we reach that level of scale where it's worthwhile to do. So I think it's important that we think about where are those opportunities to just make it easy for people to make that more sustainable choice. Because we still have to make those individual decisions. But if we're making the sustainable decision the easiest one through some more collective action, then that's how we'll get there.
It's essentially the replay of the old tragedy of the commons, where we have a common facility that'll pick this stuff up. Oh, what's one little more piece of styrofoam or one more extra bottle or something like that? And it adds up. That's what...
Yeah, and that's the idea behind, in Beverly now, thanks to some work over many years and working with businesses and consumers, we got the plastic bag ban. So you sort of bring your bag or use paper. A lot of communities are also looking at banning polystyrene containers because those aren't recyclable. The nip bottles that aren't recyclable and that often become litter. A variety of other things that there are alternatives to. But unless everybody shifts to the alternative
Yeah.
at once, it can be harder to make those alternatives available. But things like the food containers, there are already a lot of small businesses in Beverly testing out compostable takeaway containers. The folks at Green Beverly have helped coordinate among companies so that they can find sourcing for those materials, so that they're not paying a huge premium to be the only one that has compostable containers. But if everybody is demanding them, then we can sort of boost
Some of these
that
decisions
market.
at the municipal level get to be kind of strange because for a while we couldn't use paper bags because we're destroying all the trees.
Right.
So we went to plastic, and the next thing you know, you can't use plastic bags because they're everywhere.
Right.
It's back to paper again. And I don't think there's a hell of a lot of deep thought goes into some of these decisions. It's one of these, almost like a knee-jerk reaction that somebody raises a flag and, we
have
all
to
got to
react.
salute. Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely true that the decision making can be reactive. It often takes some spark, but I would disagree that it's not deliberate and thoughtful most of the time, because I think the actual situation changes, right? So the recyclability of paper versus plastic has changed as technology has changed.
Yeah.
And so if you go to the grocery store, the bag that, if you use a paper bag that you get is probably, could be 100% post-consumer recycled paper, and will probably be recycled when it leaves you.
Paper is recyclable very easily.
Yeah, and so those sort of trade-offs, as we learn more, we change policies to account for what's new or what we've learned along the way, and rebalance those trade-offs, because sometimes what is hugely cost prohibitive at one point becomes more cost effective when either the cost goes down or the alternatives become more costly. So I think that's what we're facing now. You had also mentioned the sort of broader move towards electrification, different sources for heating, for transportation, because that's where most of our impact on climate change is coming from, and just our impact on our health. And there, I think the economics are really changing. And so we're thinking about not just what does it cost to upgrade our buildings or move to electric vehicles, because some of those price tags are high, but we're weighing it against alternatives that are either just as high at the end of the day, or might be a little cheaper in the short run, but are disastrous for our overall future. So that has shifted over time.
Well,
so what we consider now might look different than
Salem is going through an exercise of passing some sort of electrification requirements. Is Beverly considering the same thing?
So I think all cities and towns are looking at their sort of how we are encouraging construction in our cities to meet the statewide stretch code. So there's sort of now different levels of sustainability that we can push for and either require or incentivize. And so all cities and towns have been sort of waiting for that agreement at the state level of just how ambitious are we going to be, and then we can match that, we can try and exceed that, we could be the laggards if we really want, but I don't think we want that.
What's the state requiring?
So
what are they thinking of requiring?
Yeah, I'm not the expert, but it's been over the last like 2-3 years finalizing, and so the gold standard is like passive buildings that have basically no impact, no emissions, but there's no timeline for when we'll require that. But there's sort of, I think, more and more of the guidance on, okay, if you're using this kind of system, you're really far behind. If you're using this kind of system, you are, X% more efficient. And so I think the city is looking out for city properties, and then also for what our requirements are, but also any incentives we can offer. Are we pushing people to not use gas at all in new buildings. There are some cities that are considering that.
Yeah.
We don't have anything on the table right now in terms of new requirements in the building code or new incentives, but I think those must be coming, and there's something I'm thinking about trying to learn more about, trying to figure out what makes sense for Beverly specifically. Are there things that we need to be thinking about in terms of resilient building as well? Because there's what's the impact of our buildings and the heating and cooling systems they use on overall emissions and the effects from there. But there's also how do our buildings stand up to the damage we've already caused, and even this week seeing flooding in various parts of the city, seeing just extreme weather impacting people at different times of year than we're used to, things like that. I think we have to look at both sides of that in where and how we're building. So.
One of the things that I've stumbled into and sort of got burned on is Mass Save puts out this list of enticements to make changes.
Yep.
And several years ago now, when I bought the house, it had one of these Robbie the Robot type of big cast iron coal-fired boilers that somebody had converted.
And we all collectively had an interest in you changing that, right? So that's why those incentives are there.
That was the technology when the house was built.
Yeah.
It was built in 1912 through 1914.
Yeah, and that had reached its useful life.
And over the years it had been converted to oil and then converted to gas when I bought it. So I went out and said, okay, I want a more modern gas-fired boiler, which I got. And it's 84% efficient. The incentive doesn't kick in until you get to 85. And now if you look at it, you got to be up to 95 because you have to have a condensing boiler. So I think this is one of the problems, that you get halfway into this thing and the incentive is not there anymore.
Yeah.
And a similar thing with looked at heat pumps. And to do my house, it would take $36,000 worth of heat pumps. I have to have 2 units, and they can't do the whole house because it's 3 stories and it complicates things. But I was saying, okay, you get a $10,000 rebate. Well, you've already got gas in the house, so you only get $4,000, because basic problem with the heat pump is in the really cold weather, they don't work that well.
Yeah, although interestingly, last winter there was some great coverage of those really extreme cold scenarios that we had, and up through, sort of Massachusetts on up, New Hampshire and Maine, looking at the performance of heat pumps now that there are more installed, because it's one of those things when only a few people have them in a few situations and all have backups, it's harder to see that performance. But it was generally strong, and I think people were pleasantly surprised at that performance, even in really extreme conditions. But yeah, and I think what you're describing is the challenge that we have, because we want to offer incentives that help people do those things that they can't afford to do on their own or wouldn't choose to do on their own because of that differential. So if we can make up the difference, because it's better for everyone if each house does make those shifts, and that adds up, right? So we have to somehow find ways to structure those programs that we're not spending, taxpayer dollars to incentivize just those incremental shifts. We're incentivizing those bigger shifts that will make a big impact. So it's tough.
The other concern I have is all this electrification, electric vehicles, the electric school buses, and heat pumps for your house, and all this stuff. It's coming off the grid. And I don't see many programs to say, we got to make the grid bigger and stronger.
Right.
We keep seeing, like last year, there was threats of brownouts if you run your air conditioners too much.
Yeah.
And even the gas company was saying, we may be running short of gas because they didn't bring in the extra pipeline we've been pushing for.
Yeah.
So some of these infrastructure problems, I don't think get enough looking at before some of these decisions are made.
Yeah, it's a tough balance there too, and I think that's why you have to kind of look at the whole system. So
Yeah.
there's how are we generating electricity? Can we have cleaner sources? Then there's the electric grid and the capacity and the age and upkeep and maintenance and quality of that grid. And then there's how we're using the electricity at the end. And I think there are people working on each of those steps, but you're right, we have to look at that whole big picture.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to, shifting to electric vehicles in particular, we can't think of that as that's going to solve all the problems, because if we're not also addressing how often we're using vehicles to get, one person to one place, investments in public transportation, which ours is crumbling around here. Investments in public transportation and thinking about making walkability and bikeability real priorities in our communities. There's obviously places that you have to drive. There's times when it's fun to drive, sure, but I think we also have to think about just, again, making it easier for people to make that more sustainable choice. That if there's a public transportation route that takes 50 people with one vehicle, then that one vehicle, whether it's electric or gas, is going to have less of a footprint.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that has to be part of the conversation too, and means that as we shift to electric vehicles, we're not necessarily, and we shouldn't be increasing the demand for electricity at that same rate that we have for gas-powered vehicles. So I think that's a piece of it too.
I think that a lot of people don't recognize that the system we got is a lot better than some other alternatives. Give you, for instance, had to get my shoulder replaced, so going to Boston to get it done. Mm-hmm. And there's several trips in and out.
Yeah.
And it was reasonably convenient. Hop on a train in downtown Beverly, drops you off at North Station. It's a bit of a walk around the corner to get to Mass General, but it's doable.
Yep.
And you still run into some of these interface problems that supposedly there's a bus that runs around all the Mass General.
Yeah.
It was never there when I was looking for it. So there's some of these problems that still need to be worked on. And you look at Beverly, we talk about having a vibrant downtown community. Fine. You can't hardly park there anymore. And even though the city's going to buy that lot, parking is still tough. So part of the solution, I think, needs to be a more vibrant communication system that let people know what's available, and also a much more vibrant transportation system so that you can hop on a bus or a jitney out in the suburbs, get a ride in, and get a ride back out again.
Yeah, and I mean, downtown's a great example of that. If you don't know where all the lots are, good luck finding them without a map in front of you pointing out, because our signage, there is some, but it's not great to help direct people who are coming downtown for the first time or haven't parked in that area for a while. And if you can park at one end of downtown and then hop on a circulator to get around, much easier, and then you're willing to just leave your car and go do all the things. And it's not just Beverly. A lot of communities are facing that. But I was just interviewing people for a role in my day job. Our office is in the Cummings Center, and several people asked, "Is this accessible by public transportation?" And I had to say, sort of. You can take the train and walk over. I do that regularly. And if you have any mobility issues, that will be a challenge. And the connection, that last mile, it's there, and you have to get the timing exactly right for it to work. And so that's like, we're like almost there, but I couldn't really say, no, you can rely on public transportation to get here regularly.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that's got to be made to happen.
Yeah.
I don't know how many years ago it was. Back in the days when there was a Beverly Times, they did a special on the shoe because it was an architectural improvement in style and direction, a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the pictures they show is still stuck in my mind was the train parked in their front yard,
Yeah.
and people were getting on and off the train.
Yeah.
And you can date this thing because all the women were wearing those big hats, the very tight waists, and the big skirts. So that's late 1800s.
A while ago. Yeah.
So that happened.
Yeah.
And we lost it. And we got to get it back. And I think these are the kinds of things that we have to work on at the system level.
Yep.
And one of my favorites is I had to fly into Love Field outside of Dallas. And they had a horizontal elevator. It was a train, actually, but no driver.
Yeah.
And it stopped, and you were standing at the platform. It stopped, the doors opened, you got on, and you looked up, okay, it's going to stop there. And it would go around and stop at every one of the terminals.
Yeah.
You know,
Very efficient. And,
so this is the kind of things that I think that people have got to start considering for a city like Beverly. How do we make some of this stuff happen so that we can really have a vibrant downtown that you can use?
Yeah.
And after I've solved half the problems of the world.
I know. Thank you for coming up with all these solutions.
So it's something to work on. I think we ought to talk about again sometime soon.
That'd be great. And there are a couple of things coming up right now. We just got to the City Council the funding proposal for the ground source heat pump renovation at the library.
Yeah,
so there's going to be a public hearing on that any day now, probably early February.
I would like to see that one.
Yeah. And they're also looking for volunteers for the committees that advise the city on these things: waste reduction, clean energy advisory.
Put my name down.
Excellent. Great.
And ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, there's a lot to talk about, a lot to work on, and we have to get involved, every one of us, and put our 2 cents worth in, and we can't complain later if we didn't. And thanks again for watching, and we'll be back with more. Take care.